So we are really excited to bring you this video about our trek up Mount Kilimanjaro. I'm Lou.
And I'm John of Independent Travel Reviews. Now, whether it's always been a personal ambition to climb Mount Kilimanjaro,
or if you've been roped into it by someone else,
or if you're a serious hiker or climber and this is your natural next progression,
we have 4 essential pieces of advice to give to you. So number 1, be prepared. And that means mentally, physically, and with the correct equipment.
So number 2 is make the most of your time before and after your trek in Tanzania. It's got a huge amount to offer.
And number 3 is really simple. Stop thinking about it, just do it. You won't regret it.
And number 4, watch our videos, because not only will they help you prepare, but they'll also give you a great flavour of the amazing experience to come. First 2 videos in this series are designed to help you prepare for your trek from the very first start of the planning phase. Now, one of the first decisions you will probably make is which route you will take to the summit, and there are a number of choices and we'll go through those in a minute. And it is worth taking a moment to reflect on the fact that the route that you choose can play a big part in determining whether you successfully summit Kilimanjaro. And the reason for that is that different routes climb at different rates, and potential for altitude sickness increases if you choose a route that climbs very quickly. Now, one of the next decisions you will probably make will be to decide when to go. And that is a critical decision, because there are times when the weather is relatively benign, and then finally you will make a decision about how you get there. And we will talk a little bit more in detail about the geography of the area, how you can get there, and what the options are depending on what else you're doing with your time in Tanzania. And then the final part of this first video will be to talk about things like the currency, and what you need to take with you, and what you can get when you're there, and also how you keep in touch while you're in Tanzania. Now, there are no less than 7 established routes to the summit of Kilimanjaro. Okay, so let's just start by establishing a principle, and that is that generally speaking, the longer you spend on the mountain, the more chance you have of successfully making the summit. And the reason for that is because it gives your body longer to acclimatise to the altitude, and therefore reduces your chances of getting acute mountain sickness. Now, we are going to talk about acute mountain sickness in our second video, where we talk in a little bit more detail about the preparation and the things you need to take on your trek. Now, the amount of altitude you gain per day can be critical in determining whether or not you're successful to get to the summit. And you can see from the screen now the amount of altitude you gain per day on each of the established routes, and the success rate that those routes enjoy in getting people to the summit.
Yep. Generally speaking, the lower the elevation gain per day, the higher the success rate. The 2 exceptions are the Shira Route and the Marangu Route. Yeah. The Shira Route follows a similar route to the Lemosho Route, but starts at a much higher altitude and so has little time for proper acclimatization. The Marangu Route is very popular, and it is the only route that uses huts rather than tents. It has a reputation for being an easier route, although the scenery is not as spectacular, and it tends to attract less experienced hikers. Combined with the reduced acclimatization time, this may explain the lower success rate. The Umbwe Route is considered the most difficult and steepest route. It is typically only used by the most experienced hikers. Now, the Machame Route is the most popular way to climb Kilimanjaro. It has excellent scenery, but remember, the 6-day option has a lower success rate than the 7-day option. The Rongai Route is the only route that approaches from the north. Okay. It is a relatively underused route, so the statistics for success vary considerably. Now, because the northern slopes see relatively less precipitation during the rainy season, it is a more popular route at that time. The 2 routes with the highest success rates are the Lemosho Route and the Northern Circuit. Both offer relatively low elevation gains per day. The Northern Circuit has the highest success rate. However, it is the most expensive as it does take the longest.
Now we're going to focus on the Lemosho or Lemosho route, depending on how you pronounce it, in videos 3 and 4 of this series. But in the meantime, here's a little snapshot of what our guide, Julio Ludago, had to say about it.
So we are doing the Lemosho route. Why do you think the Lemosho route is a good route for people to do?
Lemosho Route, I can say, is the best because has got good scenery and has got more time to acclimatize and has got success rates for people to conquer the roof of Africa.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's 8 days, isn't it?
Yes. Also, if you want to take Lemosho Route, I will recommend not less than 7 days.
Not less.
Although, if you are doing 7 days, on day 2 is a little bit longer, that you will be doing like 18 kilometers.
Okay.
So in order to let your body acclimatize well, I will recommend 8 days or even more.
Now the longer you spend on the mountain, the more it costs. Just to give you a rough idea, expect to spend in the region of $300 per day more for each additional night you spend on the mountain, and that covers the cost of the porters, the guides, the food and the camping permits. But also bear in mind the fact that it may be a false economy to choose a cheaper, shorter trip because that risks the possibility that you don't acclimatise and don't make the summit. Now let's move on to the best time of year to go to Kili.
When to climb Kilimanjaro may depend on what other activities you are doing in Tanzania. If you intend to either join a safari or visit Zanzibar, either side of your Kilimanjaro trek, then the best time to go is between June and September. You can see that you can also do safaris November to February, but the main peak time for safari is June through to October. Kilimanjaro has 2 wet seasons, and advice is to typically avoid these. These wet seasons are shown by the red periods on the screen now.
Mount Kilimanjaro is in northern Tanzania, just south of the Kenyan border. The town of Moshi is the nearest large town to the majority of the gates which access the trails onto the mountain. The larger town of Arusha is 70 kilometres to the west of Moshi. Moshi is often regarded as the gateway to Kilimanjaro, whilst Arusha is regarded as the gateway to the northern safari circuit. Mount Kilimanjaro International Airport is 20 kilometres west of Moshi. It was purpose-built to provide access to the safari and trekking regions and is by far the most convenient way of accessing the treks. It's served by a handful of international airlines. Most flights will involve a change of aircraft somewhere like Istanbul or Doha, but there are a small number of direct flights from some European cities. One thing to watch out for is that some Kilimanjaro flights make a stop at either Dar es Salaam or Zanzibar, either on their way to or from Kilimanjaro. So what are the other options for getting to the region? So there are 3 trains a week between Dar es Salaam and Arusha which go via Moshi. There are also buses that run on a regular basis between Moshi, Arusha and Dar es Salaam. The other option is to fly to Nairobi and then get a land transfer from Nairobi to Arusha or Moshi. That's actually what we chose to do, and here's why we did it and how we did it.
So to get to Kilimanjaro, we chose to fly into Nairobi, Kenya, and we chose this route for a variety of reasons. So although this route means only one flight from the UK direct to Nairobi, it isn't the simplest way of getting to Kilimanjaro.
Why did we choose this route? Well, firstly, it was a direct flight. So secondly, it involved a 240 kilometre transfer from Nairobi airport to Moshi, which meant that we got to see a lot of the region, which was really important to us.
Thirdly, from a cost perspective, it worked out really cheap for us because we were using air miles.
As it happens, we were doing a safari from Arusha, and Arusha is on the route from Nairobi airport to Moshi, so it did make more sense from our perspective to do that. But finally, for me personally, I'd always had a bit of an itch to cross a land border in Africa. Don't ask me why, but it was just on my bucket list. and this was a great opportunity to do just that.
There were two drawbacks to this route option that we chose. The firstly was because we were coming from Kenya, we actually needed to get a yellow fever certificate, so we had to do that before we left. And the other drawback was the fact that we needed to get a visa for Kenya and Tanzania. You will for Tanzania, whatever, but for Kenya, and how much was it?
Well, it's a transit visa you can get away with because we were only in Kenya for less than a couple of days, but you have to get one for each transit, and it's $20 in each direction, so that does add to the cost.
So we planned on getting the public bus from Nairobi airport to Moshi, but unfortunately our flights got cancelled the morning we were supposed to fly out, and that resulted in a bit of chaos, and we ended up having to get a taxi, which cost, I think it was about $250.
It was about $250 in each direction,
Compared to about $20 for the bus.
I have to say, this option is not a simple option, and by far the simplest and most convenient way to get to Moshi is to fly to Kilimanjaro International Airport. There's no doubt about that. But from a point of view of seeing the region and feeling like you're on an adventure, it was a brilliant way to do it, wasn't it?
It was a real experience, and crossing the border was also a real experience.
Now, most ATMs in Tanzania give out Tanzanian shillings, even though the preferred currency for the majority of tourist activities is the US dollar. Now, you will find that quite a lot of the credit card terminals at places like hotels actually charge you in US dollars, but it is well worth planning ahead and budgeting for how many dollars you'll need in cash, because it is easier to bring those with you. This does include tipping your porters and your guides at the end of your trek. Now, there's a section on tipping in video 2. You may find that some of the activities that you do in Tanzania, the provider would like you to pay by bank transfer, either the deposit or the full amount. Now, I did quite a lot of research on this, and I found that wise.com gave the best exchange rate, and it was also fairly straightforward to use to transfer money to bank accounts in Tanzania.
We were advised that Vodacomm had the best coverage in Tanzania, so we brought a physical Vodacomm SIM card. We paid $10 for 10 gigabytes of data. The registration process did require us to give our passport details to the vendor. In reality, coverage on the mountain itself was almost non-existent. There are very small pockets where you will get a signal. There are also eSIMs available for Tanzania, if you have an eSIM enabled phone. There is more information about the Vodacomm SIM card in the description of this video.
Well, that's it for video 1. Thank you very much for watching. So we hope you've enjoyed it enough to move on to video 2. And if you enjoyed it, we're always very grateful if you subscribe and like our videos. See you next time.